Daniel, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good morning.
Good evening.
I think Daniel can hear me, which is the most important thing.
I can hear you, yeah.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to share my screen now. This is some snippets that Daniel's helped us put together, courtesy of his friend Pele, who graciously let us use a lot of these pictures today. So, Daniel, my first question for you is one that came in from Jeffrey Leong in Victoria. And I believe Jeffrey's visited you before, good friend of yours. Jeffrey was very keen to understand. He said, we cannot import birds into Australia, and we haven't been able to since 1992. His question to you was, what should we do here to collect the material to be able to breed that modern budgerigar?
Well, hello everyone. Difficult question. I think that's a question that say again.
Sorry, somebody had their thing off mute. You go. That wasn't me.
I think that's a question that many hundreds of breeders from Australia are asking themselves for 30 years now. I could see interesting birds in 2014 when I came twice to Australia. Some people had some directional feathering, some people had the blow, some people had the good neck, the good shoulder. But what I realized is that Australian breeders do not really like to work together. I mean, I have a group of friends that we are sharing birds. They're going around and they can use my birds, I can use their birds, and it's giving and taking. And some breeders in Australia that I don't want to mention any names, but I told them to work together because I could see that if they would work together, one of the breeders had some directional feathering in their face.
Love this mutation. I love it.
For the birds, and I said you should exchange birds, and you will see you will get good results. And sometimes 1, 2, 3 years later, I asked, did you do that? And they said, no, it did not happen. And they're friendly, but each one prefers to do a little bit his own thing. And I realized that the hobby in general in Australia is much different. We in Switzerland, or say we in Europe, we have lots of we are visiting each other, and if you want to buy some birds, you give a call or you write a text message, and you ask the breeder, can you make an appointment? I'm looking for some cinnamon opaline hens, for example. And then you make an appointment and you meet each other. Clear. And in Australia, that's completely different. You don't do that. Even neighbors that live, well, neighbors in Australia are 2 hours, your neighbors. Even they don't visit each other, and you have the auctions. Well, I don't have to explain to you what the auctions mean, but I didn't know that in Switzerland or in Europe, nobody is doing that, or I don't know about. And so you have a catalog, and there are the birds in with description, and you buy the bird, but it's I think it's very difficult or different if you buy a bird depending on pictures, instead if you visit stats and you see what birds are there, and maybe you see another bird, and normally you cannot buy the perfect bird, but you can buy a certain feature, let's say big spots or directional feathering or a good neck or anything. And to go back to your question, I think, well, a big problem in Australia is that most birds that I really liked, they had a serious ticket problem. So I don't know where they came from, but in every stud that I've seen and also on the show bench, many of the good birds have tickets. And well, it's a major fault, but I have in my store the very few ones, but I would work with them for sure. But of course, you also have to avoid it. And I was surprised that even birds that are winning had those flecking. But I think it would be possible to create a modern show budgie, and if people would more exchange birds. But I mean, there's a lot of birds going around and they are sold, but that people work together, I think that's not really happening. And I think that's why it's more difficult to make progress.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's a good answer. Do you think that we have all of the ingredients here? That was Jeffrey's second question.
Well, I've seen a grey-green cock from an old. Jeffrey will know the name. I don't remember, but
sorry, there's somebody's off mute.
I saw there was a grey-green cock from I think he stopped and maybe he even died, but that was a very interesting bird. And he had, because he had directional feathering that you can see on that cinnamon spangle from before, and I think that's the biggest difference. You see, most of my birds are having this directional feathering in the face, and that makes the bird looks quite different. And that grey-green cock had it, and it was sold for huge price, I think for $8,000 Australian dollars. And what's a huge amount of money. Anyway, the prices in Australia are very high. When I see the pictures, and sometimes people send me pictures of what price the bird was sold to, and the prices you're having in Australia are much higher than the prices we have here on the continent. But that's probably because we have much bigger choice, or I don't know. But I think it's possible, but it's still a long way to do, a long way to go. And okay. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Jeffrey. I was visiting him, and he certainly, when I see, he sends me regularly pictures of his birds, and I can see that he's on a good way. And but it's still, yeah, for sure, it's more difficult to get birds in Australia than it's for us, where we can travel anywhere and get certain features we are looking for.
Yep. Okay. I was watching one of your old presentations, and you talked about back in 2004, you visited somebody, I believe it was in South Africa. And you talked about, at that time, the big bird being the beautiful bird. And you saw, I think you mentioned these longtails, and you talked about bringing them back, and obviously created a different budgerigar with it. And obviously you went on to win European championships, and those birds didn't have long tails. Curious to understand how you went about using that feature and then breeding that feature out of the birds at the same time. So you saw something in the bird, the size, and it came with a fault, and then you managed to breed a good bird out of it. Was it just selective pairings that you used for that?
Well, I didn't. The last question I didn't understand. The very last sentence. What was it?
The strategy. Did you use just like, were you very careful with your pairings, not to double up the long tail, or did you?
Oh, yeah. As I mentioned before, the flecking. Fleckings is a major fault. And having a tail that is too long or wings that are too long is also a major fault. Yep. And as most people know, most of my pairings are love pairs, or I try to, either I see them in the flight and I pick them out. If they're not too close related, I take them. Or if both birds have small spots, I don't put them together. I try to balance it. And of course, I would never pair two birds with longer tails or longer wings together, because you double up the fault. And with any fault, fleckies, don't put flecked birds together, because you fix it. And those birds from South Africa, I think I bought 13 birds and 6 or 7 of them did breed, about half of them. And I kept every single youngster of them. I didn't sell anything. And with those birds, I continued. Some of the birds were older and died soon. But with those birds, I could see that in the gene of those birds, there's an extra length of feather. And I mean, in South Africa, I went there in 2000, the first time. That was after the death of my mother. I went traveling in the south of Africa in different countries, and I made a stop also at Reinhard Molketin's place. And I was wondering whether it's possible to get that extra length of feather in a different, if you have a head feather that is longer, it looks nice. If you have a body feather that is too long, it doesn't look nice, and too long wings and tails, it's not nice either. Birds can't fly properly anymore. And yeah, when I was young, I was learning that from each pair, you should have 16 youngsters, because then you have the full, maybe I can show you what I mean.
The mathematical probability?
Yes, I make something very primitive. Wait. So I don't know. Can you see that? So these are 16 4x4 different possibilities. And let's say you have a hen with certain features, and you have a cock with certain features, and you want to, if you pair them together, let's say birds that have so that's the features that are coming from the cock, and here are the features coming from the hen. And if you have 16 youngsters, you have different possibilities. Here is a lot of, let's say these birds from here, they have a small head and long wings and tails. That's the worst you can get. And these birds here, they have long feathers in the face, but short tails and wings. And so when you put a flecked opaline to a normal bird with small spots, you will get a certain amount of birds that have that are ticked and having small spots. That's what you don't want, get rid of them. But you will also get birds that are clean with big spots. And these ones, you have to go on. I'm not sure whether you could follow.
No, I follow exactly. That was a very good explanation.
Okay. And it's all about selection. And if you select, you're the master, you can say in which direction you want to go. And if you let's say spots, if you say I want to have big spots, that means big spots means you have a wide feather, a wide round feather. And if you go on with always every year big spots, and after a few generations, let's say after 5 generations, you will realize that most of your birds are having bigger spots. So then you were able to fix a feature. And I think nowadays it's still, for most people, it's still the face that takes the attraction. But I think many people are too much fixed on the face. I mean, I really don't spend much time on social media, and I really cannot do it exactly. Don't know how it works. But what I want to say is that when you see the pictures on social media, you always just see the head, huge heads, boom. And you don't see the rest of the bird. But it's also very important, the position above the perch, the position of the wing, and so on. And on Facebook, you just see a face, and most of the time the picture is made like this, very close to the camera, and then the head looks huge, but you don't see, does the feather has the bird has a tail, or does he grows a cyst or whatever. You just see the head. And if you take a picture like this, my head is also now much bigger than the rest of the body, but that makes a complete wrong impression. That's also why I would never buy a bird for a lot of money without seeing the bird in real, because sometimes a bird can look much better than he really is, just because of the camera. If you make like this, now my hand is huge, but it's not. Now my hand is small, but it's just the camera, the perspective of the camera. That's, oh, can you just go back quickly? Is that possible?
Without freezing it up.
That's a bird, what I would call to be very ugly. But many people still think, can you go back? They would say, that's a super bird, that's a super bird. But for me, it's not, can you stop it? The picture, is that possible?
Yep.
I mean, it's, it's flecked. The feather is not, it's not closed. It's not a dense feather. And if you don't see the body feathers, they should stay together. And on that bird, it's a double buff. It's a hen. She's a good breeding hen, actually. I have more than 10 chicks from her. Most of the time, birds like this don't breed properly. But it's always a risky game. If you have a hen that breeds like this, of course, you can make huge progress. But that's for me an example of, it's not a show bird. It's an interesting bird, but it shouldn't be shown, because also when you see the feathers on the left and the right, and it's everywhere a little bit a mess. But if I would put that picture on Facebook, I never do that. But if I would get hundreds of people will say super bird, mashallah, mashallah, super, super, super. But I think that hen has no tail, for example. You don't see that, but and it's typical that birds with those faces, with those extreme feathers, have no tail. And a bird like this never can be shown. And when I go to a show, many people are always saying, my very best birds, I couldn't bring them, they were not in condition. That's what everybody's saying. But that's also certain birds, like that style of bird. They're all the year, more or less, in molt. They never, my Cinnamon Gregory in the European show winner that won twice, he was a bird I could have shown him the whole year. He always looked nice, and you never saw him really molting. That was very fascinating. And that kind of feather, they're always molting a little bit. And that's why they're never in condition. It's not because, okay, then at that moment is the show and the bird is not in condition, because that style of bird, they're never in condition. Or let's say they're never feather complete. There are always a few feathers growing, and that's in the genes. It's not bad luck. It's just a genetic problem, I would say. And
so, Daniel, question for you: you obviously don't like the feathers around the feet of the bird, hanging over the perch. Where do you like the longer feathers on the bird?
Well, more in the face, of course.
In the cap and the mask, or just the cap?
Or in the mask. That's probably the first feature I was looking for when I was, I don't know, 18, 19, 20. I started to like birds with a deep mask. And the bird with a deep mask means nothing else than the bird has long feathers. If a bird has a short mask, then the whole feathers on the bird will be short. And so I was really using a lot of birds with long mask. That was the first. No, the first feature was size, getting bigger birds, just big. And afterwards, I was looking for changing the length of the mask. And later I started to look for the directional feathering, and I think that was what made the difference. You see on those babies already, especially the cinnamon, that the feather are going from the beak. You already see that on the babies, that the feathers are going sidewards down, and that makes the bird looks different, more majestic.
Okay. Daniel, you talked about changing the birds in your ideal bird. You mentioned at one point that you didn't like much of the openness in the cap. You preferred a much denser cap on the budgerigar. Can you tell us a little bit more about this and why you don't like it?
Well, because it's not beautiful. Let's take that cinnamon. That's one of the birds that I never was able to show. And now he's 4 years old, and he's not feather complete anymore. On one wing he was losing some feathers, and I think they don't grow back. But if you can show him again, you see. Can you stop? Can you stop now? Oh, so from here he looks nice, but he's not 100% in condition now. But already on the top of the head, you see there are how do you say, gaps, missing feathers, and the birds I really like, and I think these are the true show winners. They should have a little blow, but not too much. I think when it's too much, it's ugly. And if you can see sidewards, you can see through the feathers, then I think it's it's like a kakadu. In Australia, you have plenty of kakadoos, and they play with the
cockatoos, yes. Yep.
Cockatoos with the, but that's something else. And I remember I saw that feature the first time at Doug Sadler's place. I was visiting him in 1996. That was during the European football championship. I was visiting him with my bicycle with a friend together. And he's dead now, very nice guy, but his heads, the birds were very narrow, really not, I didn't like them. But can you stop quickly?
Yep.
No, I just want to say, have a look. As it's not ideal when the feathers, he was not 100% in condition here. When he's 100% in condition, you actually can't see through. But just to explain, if it's too much blow and you can see through, it's no good. That's what I want to say. And the birds from Doug Sadler, they were quite narrow, but they all had this feather coming down. And I was looking at this and I thought that's interesting. And later there was a guy called Wilson that was able to fix that features, and I was getting birds also from that bloodline. And certainly I also, could you see what I mean? A certain blow is nice, but not too much. That's what I want to say. Okay, let's stop. Let's talk about something else.
No, that's okay. Tell us about your theory behind size and fertility. The bigger the bird, what do you see with fertility?
Well, you already answered the question more or less, but that's an example. He's quite fertile. That gray-wing guy, for example, or that cinnamon gray is very fertile. He's now also again on 5 or 6 fertile eggs, but he's not super big. But the gray-green from before, he's really big. Well, to make it easy, I know a guy from Switzerland. He breeds the small budgies, the color budgies, and I've never visited him, but I was told that in every box when you open, there are 5 chicks, 4 chicks, 6 chicks, 7 chicks, all eggs fertile. He has the small color budgie, and I think budgies in general are made from nature to be very, very fertile. And when we always pair bigger birds together and make them bigger and bigger, I think somehow you lose the fertility. And And I mean, what people in Europe are doing, and I'm sure it's also done by breeders in Australia, is then to use artificial insemination. But as I told many times, I think it's silly. It's the wrong way. When a bird is not able to reproduce himself, I think we're doing something wrong. And when I see birds mating in the cage, I think, yeah, that's funny. That's natural. And this, by the way, this pair, this hen, the first year, she didn't lay an egg. And I thought, well, that's forget her. I wanted to give her away. And that cock from before, the cinnamon spangle, I tried him with different hens that I liked, and he didn't like. He was no interested in none of them. And then later I saw him with that hen, and I said, "Well, let's try. Let's put them together." And they produced me 9 chicks last year in 2 rounds. And that's also a hen. Let's say from 10 hens in that size, 5 are not breeding or almost not breeding, and 1 or 2 are breeding a few chicks, and then you have 1 or 2 out of 10 hens like this that are really breeding well. And that's a hen that is really breeding well, and you don't see that. But normally big hens are more difficult to breed, and you lose fertility. Big hens are laying less eggs, and I think the breeding, the cycle of cocks being fertile is also getting shorter if the birds are too big. So if you realize you have a problem with fertility, you should start using smaller birds as well. Don't make the birds too big. If the birds cannot fly anymore, it's no good. You're gone too far.
I did notice, Daniel, you talked about back in 2010, 2011 that your daughter mentioned about the birds not being able to fly, and you had a realization and you changed your tactics in the breeding room. Was it just in selective pairings that you went back the other way to make sure that all the birds can fly? Just through the choice of pairs?
As I told you already before, there are 2 important periods. First, how do you pair your birds together? And afterwards, which birds you keep for breeding. So if you always just keep the big birds, your birds will become bigger and bigger and also lose fertility and so on. And if you only use the small, the beautiful color ones, you will get very attractive colors, but the birds will become smaller and smaller. So you always have to balance the color, and you have the size, and it's always a balance to everything. And I mean, in general, I tried to mate, or I wanted to get back from the feather. I mean, all those big birds that can't fly anymore, they simply have too much feathers. And I think in Australia, I think I haven't seen any longtails or anything like this. I was told that the birds came originally from a guy called Manikini, and he had them from some UK breeders, and he took them to South Africa and he fixed them. And it was a genetic default, or how, I don't know how to say. But when you make the selection and you always just keep the big ones and get rid of the small ones, your birds are getting too big. You have to find a balance to get, you don't want small birds, but you also don't want big monster birds that cannot fly. And of course, I started to sell a lot of the big ones and kept more of the small ones. And after this, I'm not at the point yet where I want to be. I really would like to have a flight full of birds that are able to fly, and I don't have it. I also have birds that cannot fly, but I'm on the way on that. And I mean, when you visit the stud and 80-90% of the birds are sitting on the floor. Most of those birds cannot fly, and I mean, we are breeding budgies and not chicken. Chicken are sitting on the floor and cannot fly properly. But our birds, from the nature, they are able to fly. I mean, if you look at pictures from budgies in the wild, they are fantastic flyers. It's difficult to catch them. And our birds, yeah, it's not that difficult to catch them. But
No.
it's all about selection. If you only breed birds that cannot fly, you will get youngsters that cannot fly.
No, good answer. One question, I notice in amongst here, there's a lot of cinnamons and cinnamon opalines that make up your stud. Why is it important to have these in your stud? And are there any features that are connected with this variety?
Well, I remember the first hen that was really showing this directional feathering. It was a cinnamon opaline gray-green hen of mine. She was a small bird, but she looked different, and she was very fertile, and I kept the youngsters. And whenever I saw anywhere on a show or when I was visiting someone, when I saw a bird that had this feature, I tried to buy it. And the more I had from those birds, the more you fix it. And nowadays, I think, yeah, almost all my birds have this feature above the eyes, more or less. And so I was able to fix it. I mean, I'm breeding budgies for more than 40 years. And let's say I breed, yeah, about 35 years, I breed seriously budgies. And try to change certain things. And yeah.
Is there any pairings that you try and avoid, Daniel? I know you mentioned at one point
this one, that's can you go back?
Sure.
That's that they already have been together as babies. I could not remember, and I tried to avoid this pairing, but finally I put them together because I was not able to get the hen breeding, and I was not able to get the cock breeding with another bird. So I put them together before we went to holiday. They had clear eggs, to make it short. But that's an example of a bird of vision. They're too big, too similar. It lacks style. And yeah, but sometimes I said, okay, let's try it. But when you have love pairings, they in general much, yeah, you have less trouble with fightings or yeah, with the birds, or they don't kill the chicks or whatever. They don't attack the chicks. That all can happen with other pairings.
Daniel, what do you do if you put a pair together and the hen goes straight in the box and she doesn't come out to mate with the cockbird?
I throw her out, and I closed. I don't have this problem anymore, but I used to have it as well, and I was using any kind of carton or newspapers to put between the nest box and the wire, and I don't do that anymore. But I put out the hens in the evening, and I put loud music on. My younger years, I was listening to heavy metal, and the birds, they quite like that. And music is for sure, as it's for human beings, it's a stimulation. What they also like is when the Hoover is on, they get quite horny somehow. And if you take the hens out and she cannot go into the nest box and make the Hoover on or any music, they like noise. They like it to be, they have noisy. And in my bird rooms, they're always around 400, 450 or up to maximum 500 birds. It's quite noisy. And the architect I was working with when we made the construction, and he was in my bird room. He said, we have to make kinds too noisy. And I mean, I don't think that all my friends don't like the birds. They think it's silly what I'm doing, but that's okay. But if they come into the bird room, they say, oh, it's so noisy. How can you stand that? That's terrible. But I'm sure the birds are loving it when it's noisy. And that's why I don't do something to support the noise, but I didn't make any kind of building construction things to avoid the noise, because I'm 100% sure it's stimulating. And also, I don't understand, also in Australia, most studs I've seen, they all keep hens and cocks separated, and young birds and old birds separated. I have no idea what that should be good for, because in nature, they're all together. And if a young bird comes into the flight, at the beginning, he's at the bottom of the ranking, and he has to fight to get bigger. And maybe 1 or 2 years later, he's the boss in there. But I think that's more or less natural. And in general, I try to make everything as natural as possible. And in the wild, I'm sure not young hens stay together and young cocks stay together, and the adult birds stay together. It's a folk of budgies. It's a big mixture of everything. And yeah, so that's why you should try to keep them together. And whenever you saw sometimes a love pair, the two Lutinos from before, for example, whenever I see a pair like this, I quickly check the pedigree. Lutinos, I don't know all the birds. Most of those birds here, the normal color birds, I know them all by heart. I know their pedigree. I don't know the ring numbers, but I know the pedigree of them. But with the Lutinos, I have to check where they come from, and if they're not too close to related, I let them breed. And as long as the birds have a good genetic background, you can be sure that some of the youngsters will have top quality again.
Okay.
That's also a love pairing. That's a young cock with that gray, they are together, and they too far now. They bred 2 super chicks now. I just came home from holiday, and in the nest there were 2 super cinnamon gray green and normal gray green, and yeah, that's it was a love pairing, and it worked. Only 2.
When it comes to breeding, Daniel, what's your experience with breeding close?
Well, when I was young, I also made close breeding pairs. It's a short way to fix certain things. If you pair father to daughter, mother to son, half sisters, cousin to cousin, and you multiply all the good features, what you want, but you also always multiply all the bad features. And I realized that some birds, when they are bred too close, that when they have a diary, a normal bird, I clean a little bit, and sometimes I give something, or I don't give anything at all, and the bird is strong enough with his immune system to fight against it, and no problem. And birds that are bred too close, they are not strong enough to fight against certain kind of disease, and they die. And you also lose fertility, and you also lose. I remember when I was a kid, I had a pinnikick. How do you say? Guinea, this small animal. It's
The guinea pig?
It's like a rat, but not. Tail from South America. Guinea pig, years old. I got one. We bought her. It's a lady, and she was getting more and more fat, really. And I said, "Ooh!" And then suddenly she had babies, and that was for me like a miracle. and obviously that mini pig was pregnant, and she had some daughters and some sons, and I had no idea, and I thought it's funny, and some I gave away. The mother was pregnant, and I had lots of mini pigs, and everyone in our area, all the kids had to take mini pigs from me. But what I was realizing, that's what I say, they all were certain. I know that with mice, it's science with mice, they it's different, mice and everything, but with mini pigs. So to make it short about your question, I would not recommend to make close relations, close matings, close relation
Okay.
parents. Better I stay in the family. I know when I grew up, everyone said you have to put cousin to cousin. That's the best pairing, but I think it's already too close. Human beings, you're not allowed to marry your cousin, because you can't think with budgies, it's more or less the same.
Understood. Tell me, do you think you need opalines to breed good budgerigars?
Yes. Why? But people over here, not people, but opalines over here have a bad reputation. When people come to my bird room and they see, let's say, normal light green cock, they ask, can I buy him? I said, I have to check it, maybe. And then I say, oh, the mother was an opaline gray hen. They said, oh, no opaline, no split opaline. And then I always know that guy has no idea about breeding budgies. I mean, most of my birds are split cinnamon and opaline. And of course, you have to handle it. If you don't be careful, you will end up with only opalines and cinnamons, and you have always to make a selection to get the normals going. But I would recommend to pair opalines to opalines. That's how you get the nice, the V on the back. And if you always pair normals to opaline, you risk to get normal birds that have the opalism. Do you say opalism?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the opalism. Maybe that's the reason why people don't like them too much. But I think in general that opalines, also for the spots, are an important features. And I love to work with opaline cinnamon hens. As I told before already a few times, I think I don't have one single bird, one single hen with cinnamon opaline that has a feather trouble. I'm sure cinnamon opaline seems to have stronger feathers structure somehow. And yeah, I like them, but certain people completely dislike them.
Talking about that, what are your thoughts about flecking? Do you think that it's an issue with excess melanin, and do you use them?
Well, I wanted to get a few good flecked birds with big spots this year, but so far I was not able. I realized that my spots used to be better. My recessive, here you see a recessive cock. In general, my recessive still have very big spots, and I'm sure that's still going back to the molcatin birds I brought in early 2000. Reinhardt birds, they had the best spots that I've ever seen. That's a feature that was dominant in his bird room, big round spots. And let's take this hen. She looks nice, but birds with that face, they can you go back? Yes, that one. Birds like this, most birds that have this face have quite average sized spots. And if the spots would be bigger, then the hen would be looking much nicer. She's having 2 chicks at the moment with the melanistic gray-green spangle you've seen before, and that's a perfect combination. But birds with big spots often have not a nice face. Somehow it seems to be linked. But birds with big spots most of the time have no feather troubles, and birds with small faces, small spots and nice faces, these are the birds that have feather troubles. It's somehow linked.
Okay.
And to go back to your question, I mean, that hen has some tickets, but of course I will use it. But I think flecking is an interesting feature. I like to use flecked birds to put into the spangles to get better markings on the wings, because what are flecking, it's too much of melanin and at the wrong place. And again, when think about this one, you will get, if you use a flecked bird into the spangles, you will get flecked spangles with poor markings, but you also will get a certain amount of birds that have good markings and no flecking. And these are the ones you want to continue with.
Okay.
You can work with it, don't make it that it's getting too many.
Daniel, watching you talk about the video of your birds, it's very clear that you know almost all of your birds and their parentage. How important do you think it is for the fancier to know his or her birds?
Well, I think that's the key. Well, I don't make many budgie visits anymore, but I remember when I was younger, I went to visit many people, and also some big names, and I asked, how did that bird breed? He said, I don't know. And this one, I don't know.
Sorry, we've somehow muted you, Daniel. You just want to put yourself off mute. I don't know what's happened there.
You put me on
now
mute.
You're back. Thank you. We heard that you went and visited somebody and that they didn't know if a bird had bred and then didn't know if another bird had bred, and then you cut out.
Exactly. The people seems not to like, not to know whether the bird was breeding or not. And I think that, yeah, you have to know that. And I know you also have to know how old is this hen, and when was he breeding the last time. I think it's very important that you work with birds that are completely recovered. I know people that are using a hen 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times until one day she's dead. But I use hens like this at my place. They work normally 2 rounds, plus maybe if they're still in condition, I make a 3rd round and take the eggs away. But yeah, to go back to your question, it's very important to know your birds, and if you don't know them, you're having too many of them. You should know also the pedigree about. I mean, that's also love pairing. Mausi, hoi! Wieso bist du mit der Claudia? Ich habe keine Zeit, ich habe das Meeting. My daughter just came home, but she shouldn't. She should be at her friend's place, because always on Tuesday. And yeah, well, I don't know what she's doing. I forgot your question. What was it?
We were talking about the attention to detail and knowing your birds, but I think you did a very good job of answering it. So I'll ask you another one that's come through. Can you tell us your thoughts on fostering chicks from your best pairs? Do you think it's a good idea, or should your best birds feed their young?
My best birds, when they have youngsters, they feed them. No, I think it's even a very bad idea. It's the same like artificial insemination. I know many of the top studs in Europe are doing that, artificial insemination and fostering pairs. That means from each pair, they take the eggs away and give it to the small budgies, and they grow the chicks. And I mean, imagine what you're doing if you're having kids, and always after birth the kid is taken away. and I think birds can get mad of it. And yeah, as I told you, I like happy birds, and I'm sure they have, like we have, more or less a genetic preposition to breed youngsters, and that's why I think it's important that that you leave birds together and let them feed the chicks their own. Maybe you know, some years ago, everybody wanted to see the cinnamon gray green of mine. And sometimes they were surprised if he was feeding 4 chicks. And but that was nothing special. I just think it's important that birds can follow their natural instincts. And that's also an interesting picture. I started a few years ago to give my birds toys to play with, and yeah, that's something that most birds are loving it. Not just the baby birds, also the adults. And with that one, they sometimes they try to jump on it and they try to keep the balance. And it's a big challenge. Who is able to put it off like this? You see, and then you fly at the top. That's yeah, I think in many starts there's just nothing. They have the perches and nothing else. And I mean, what should birds do the whole day long if they don't have nothing to play? And I mean, there's hundreds of articles about how you have to feed chicks and about antibiotics and probiotics and vitamins and supplements. That's all okay, but I think we should put much more attention on the social behavior of birds. It's more important. Well, to make it easy, happy birds breed better, and I try to make my birds happy with the intention that they breed more and better youngsters.
Oh, that makes good sense. Tell me, you've got a lot of branches in the breeding cages and in the aviaries. How do you avoid contamination coming into the bird room, like from wild bird droppings and things like that?
Well, that risk always exists. I mean, you also can bring mites in, red mites that are very awful. But I have since a few years a superb product called Exalt. I don't know whether you have that as well in Australia. That's a medication that you put very small amount of it into the water. You give it 2 days, and then a week later again 2 days, and then 4 or 5 months you have not one single mite anymore, and it's not dangerous for the babies or whatever. But of course, you have if you bring wild branches in. You also bring in any kind of little animals or whatever. It's also possible to bring any disease in, but well, I'm doing that since 40 years and so far it did not happen. But I can just, birds are loving it. If you're going afterwards to the bird room, I just gave fresh branches in this morning, and they like to eat it, they like to play it. If they are wet, they like to take a shower in the leaves. And it's just part of their social behavior. And that I think they must have fresh leaves. And I use, my birds love willows the most. They also like other hazelnut or apple tree or whatever, but the favorite is for sure willows. I also tried eucalyptus because I know that in Australia they are using eucalyptus, but my birds, I'm working with an institute, with a gardery. They produce a different kind of eucalyptus for zoos, for pandas, of course, and things like this. And I tried them as well at my place, but my birds are not too eager for eucalyptus. I don't know why.
Okay. I noticed, I read somewhere that you change the water between 4 and 7 times a day. Is that correct?
Especially in summer times. It depends whether I'm around. Well, now I've been in holiday and I had people who were looking after the birds. And one of the water changer is a girl that lives in the neighborhood. She's a student, and it depends how much time does she have. And but I try, you know, I also have drinkers for the big bottles for the birds. But most birds, they love to take a shower in the water, in the plate of water. But they also, at the same time, they shit into the water. And as long as the birds are all healthy, it's not a problem. But if you have one single bird that is sick and they shit in the water and you don't change it, a few weeks later or a few days later, you will have, or you can have, a serious problem. So I try to change it a lot, yes.
Okay. I did read also, you mentioned about trying to avoid touching the babies when they're very little for passing on infections. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I mean, one of the biggest problem in the start is always French mold, I guess. And French mold is a virus. I didn't know that it also exists in the wild. When I made, I wanted to visit Budgies in the wild with John Scoble. I think many people will know him. Hello, John, if you should listen to me or hear it. And with Mick Leah, we wanted to see wild budgies, but we haven't seen not one single one. In the few months I was in Australia, I saw thousands of other parrots, but no budgies. But they told me that in the wild they also have the French mold virus, but the natural, they fall down from the nest and on the bottom they get eaten and it's finished. But I think French mold in most starts, it's a serious problem. And as it's a virus, how do you give further a virus? It's most like Corona. We were not allowed to use our hands anymore. We say like this, hello, and not like this anymore. And I think if we have a nest with infection, and we go to the other nest, and we are the ones who are spreading around the virus. And that's why I try to avoid, I don't clean my hand from every nest to the next one. I have 90 breeding cabinets. I don't wash my hand 90 times. But I just, if not necessarily, I just look in, everything okay. Maybe I use a millet to not to touch the baby, just to see is the fourth or fifth one, is it also fed? And then I go to the next one. And of course, when I have to put on the rings, yeah, sometimes I use a toilet paper for each bird that like this, you don't touch them either. But you should use a spray for disinfection of the hand, and yeah, don't touch too many times the birds.
Okay. What do you do, Daniel, for a breeding strategy to avoid feather problems? Do you bring in outcrosses to try and keep the birds not close? Is that what you do for things like cysts and tails and things like that?
I try to bring in every year 15, 20 birds, just because to be sure that you don't get too close related. And well, I mean, to avoid feather troubles is if you don't breed with feather troubles, you still get them. But I'm surprised that also the guys that make artificial insemination, they use a cock, huge head, but a big lump on the back of the tail, and they still use his sperms and said, "Oh, not the youngsters don't get the problem." But I'm sure if it doesn't come out in the first or second generation, it will come out in the third or fourth generation. So I would never use a bird like this. And so whatever you bring into the bird comes out again sooner or later. Maybe not in the direct offspring, but probably in the third or fourth generation from the cousin side. So everything comes back. And if you work a lot with birds with feather troubles, you will get a certain amount or a big amount with feather trouble. So don't do it. Don't use them. I have at the moment a huge cinnamon gray-green hen, but she has a cyst at the back. I mean, her face is, she's the best hen in my, well, she's the hen with the biggest head. But ciao Mausi, bis am 4. Tschüss, my daughter. She has to go back to school. Simply don't use birds with, that's really, you can use birds with flackies or whatever, no problem, but don't use birds with cysts, because it's, I think, the biggest fault that the bird can have.
Okay. Do you think there's any connection, talking about long feathers, do you believe there's any connection at all between long feathers and the cold winters that are experienced up in the Northern Hemisphere? Or do you think we should be able to breed that down here just by correct selection of the birds, of the pairs?
I didn't understand. You think the long feathers are connected with the weather?
With the weather, as in, somebody asked about the cold weather, and they believe that maybe in Europe it's so cold that budgies grow longer feathers than they do in Australia.
No, I mean, if you know how nature is working, nature is working perfectly. Nature is making everything the way it should. And of course, animals that live in the cold area, they have better protection against it. But that doesn't happen in a few generations. That happens in thousands of years. And I mean, our budgies, I think they came over in 1844, as far as I know. And so that's not even 200 years ago. The first budgies from Australia came into Europe. And of course, it's amazing how birds changed in that short period. But I think that's mostly because humans started to, let's say, interfere into the pedigrees and made a selection. But it's not because the weather is cold and let's say you keep your birds always on 5 to 10 degrees temperature. It's possible to do that. But I don't think you will see after 10 years that the birds have more feather length. No, maybe after 2,000 years or something like this, but not after a few generations.
Okay. Other than a love pairing in your aviary, it seems like a lot of the pairs that you have are 2 different colors and 2 different feather types. Can you tell us a bit about that?
What do you mean? Also, I think, you know, some people are surprised that they see in my shed a lot of different types of birds, and I mean, the birds, the pictures of the birds they see are from on the show bench. Most of my birds look similar, let's say similar, not the same, but similar. And then they came the first time into my shed, and they are surprised that birds look quite different. I mean, I have small birds, I have big birds, I have birds with long feathers, I have yellow or medium feathered birds. And I always say breeding budgies is like playing a jigsaw, putting a jigsaw together. And I think it's important to have the different type of feathers to. It's always the goal is always to create the perfect budgie. And if you have not the opposite to play with, it's more difficult. But of course, I have more and more birds that are, let's say, average sized and more or less birds with show quality. When I was younger, I had much more, let's say, big hens, big cocks and smaller hens, and put them together. But more and more, I have more birds that are more or less balanced, and so that you don't have to look for the opposite, because they don't have any big fault. But I think it's good to have different looking birds.
Okay. One of the questions that came through on the chat just now, somebody was asking if you could clarify in terms of breeding relatives together, what you consider is too close. Is father to daughter too close? Is brother to sister too close? Obviously, yes. Is cousins too close?
I think so, yeah, too close. I don't do it. Well, you know, some years ago, I had a pied gray-green. He was winning best pied of Switzerland. And he was fighting in the flight with some other birds. And then I put him to another flight and he started to attack a sky blue hen. And I said, well, okay, let's put them together. And they bred one of the best birds I ever bred. They bred me a dark green cock, outstanding bird. That was in 2004 or 2005. That bird, the picture of that bird is still somehow around. That bird was better and bigger than anything else at that time. I could never show him. He was losing already soon some flights in one wing, but it was a super bird. And he was the father of all my good cinnamons I had afterwards. He was fertile and I bred, I don't know, 30, 40 chicks in 4 or 5 years from that bird. But what I want to say is that I checked later when the quality was so good, I checked the pedigree of the hen and I realized it was a daughter from the cock. I couldn't remember, and she looked completely different. And I had in that family, I never had any inbreeding problems afterwards. So that's an example of it was going well. But in general, I had some years before, I was getting 2 dilute cocks from a friend of mine. And I tried to build a family of dilutes, and that worked well at the beginning. But after a few generations, all the birds were too close related because they all went back to these 2 birds. And I lost a lot. The family more or less died out as they all, yeah. And I realized I was too close, and I told myself that problem will never gonna happen to me anymore.
Okay. Daniel, when you did your presentation back here in Adelaide in 2014, you talked about shifting the location of the eye of the budgerigar slightly backwards. Can you talk us through what you did there to try and change the appearance?
Well, can you stop the picture that we've just seen? I want to see, okay, well, you cannot see my hand here, but to explain it, that when you put the eyes of the bird more backwards, you change the whole physiognomy of the head. And birds that I don't like, they have the eye very close to the beak. And they also have no back head, no back skull. And if you change the position of the eye more sidewards, you change also the head, and those birds are looking nicer. But I want to say it's very important that also for concerning the eyes, that if you breed such a long feather that the bird cannot watch properly, no, take that bird again. Can you stop when can you go a little bit, or stop. You see, let's say that cinnamon opaline hen at the top. From the side, you must see the eye perfectly. And if you cannot see it, you're gone too far. And so I remember I bred once a crest, a full circular crest, but his feather was going like this. He couldn't see anymore. And well, many people said that's the best crest in the world and things like this, but I sold him to Arabia somehow because it was too far. The bird couldn't see. You had to cut the eye, the feathers that he was able to see. And that was, of course, a complete nonsense. So also that feature that the eye must stay free is important.
Back at that same presentation, Daniel, you talked about at the time buying 100 outcrosses, and only 5 of those 100 might take you forward. Have you found that over the years that's improved? The ratio has improved now?
Did I say so? I don't remember. What I want to say is I bought in my life, I think in the meantime, probably thousands of birds, but certainly hundreds of birds, okay? And most of the birds I bought were wasted time and wasted money, and they were no good. But if you buy 30 birds or 10 birds or whatever, you don't. If you only buy one bird, yeah, you must be very lucky that that bird breeds well and breeds the features you were looking for. But if you breed more birds, you have more chance to. But it's just you don't know which bird are the birds that bring you forward if you bring in a bird. And that's what I wanted to say is that, I mean, if I would not have bought all those birds that didn't do well for me, I also wouldn't get the birds that were really helpful. Can you understand what I mean?
Understand, yep. That makes good sense.
Maybe you can you go to the video? Can you go back to the surface where a lot of videos are seen? Yep. To the Swiss Budgie Maestro or something like this. To
the actual YouTube video? Yeah,
there you can see lots of there are lots of good pictures of at the end, I think, I'm not sure, of nice birds. They were just before or after the videos were taken just before or after a show. I don't remember, but they are good pictures of nice birds in show condition on.
Let me share this. This one here at the top or the second one?
The best show budgies, the Swiss Budgie Maestro flying. Maybe that no, go back. The DANIEL LUTOLF the end way.
This one here?
Yes, wait. I think that one. Or
yeah.
What?
I actually haven't got permission to be able to play those, obviously, because they're from Budgie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, leave. Budgie Planet is a friend of mine. I 100% you get the permission.
Well, as long as you're sure.
I'm 100% sure. 100%.
Okay. I don't want to end up in trouble. All right, let me press play on this.
I will invite you. I will visit you in the. If you have to go to prison, I come to visit you.
Okay, thank you. You want to go to the end of this, you said?
Maybe, I mean, we can go to the, just when you at the beginning you see maybe people wants to see quickly these are the pictures. That bird is still alive. He's a 2018 cock and he still breeds. But at the beginning of the video, you can see my setup, or we can try to go afterwards into the breeding room, and I can try to show you a few pictures. But as I told you, it only works that was the Swiss national winner, that one. And that bird, he was really the whole year he was looking nice and always in top condition. And of course, that a bird that has this feature is, you should get as many offsprings of it. That bird is also still alive, light green cock, still breeding well. Still, he always needs hens with big spots because as I told you at the beginning, small spots is often connected with nice face, and big spots is connected with not so nice faces.
And while we're looking at those, I will put a call out, obviously, to everyone who's on the Zoom at the moment, and just ask if there are any more questions you want to fire through on the chat. We've had some come through to me directly, and I think Daniel's answered them all. I did just send a message out to everybody if there's any more questions we have for Daniel before we wrap things up. We are about to hit 9 o'clock. So looks like I've got one just came through. Two questions we have, Daniel. Would you breed with birds with no tails?
Yeah, I do, but don't pair it to another bird with no tail. Yeah, it depends. If I have a cock with no tail and some of his youngsters have no tail as well, I stop immediately, completely. Finish. If I have from a pair, let's say 13 chicks, and the two very best ones have no tail, all the other ones are feather complete, then why not using it? And also, if you have a bird that was suffering in a French mold and his tail get lost and they don't grow back, that's also not a problem. Birds with French molds can be used for breeding, I'm sure. That's something, it's not in the genetic. French mold is nothing, it's a virus. It has nothing to do with a genetic default.
Okay.
So yes, you can use them. But
Another question,
don't pair them together. Don't
definitely pair them together.
No tail. Can you stop quickly?
Sure. Hang on. There.
This gray cock on the right, he just died. He had a huge influence on my birds. He was not a big bird, but very, very beautiful to look at. And yeah, I think it's more important to have a bird that has the perfect proportion, even if it's small. He was a small bird, also in the hand. There was not much muscle or body weight, but he was extremely beautiful. And I wanted to get more youngsters, but I got one, and they had a good influence on. He's the father or grandfather of that cinnamon gray green you've seen at the beginning that looks so nice. I think, I'm not sure, father or grandfather he is to that one. Okay, go
on. Next question we had down there. What kind of treatments do you do for your own birds outside of just the Exalt? Do you give them doxycycline, for instance, before they're breeding, or amoxicillin trihydrate for, the dead in shell or anything like that? What treatments do you do for your own birds?
Nothing.
Just the Exalt?
Well, the Exalt I'm doing since a few years, but that's just against mites and no other function. I'm working with Dr. Marcellus Birkley from Germany, and he convinced me to use probiotic and to stimulate the immune system instead of using antibiotics and destroying certain bacteria. Do you understand the
Yes.
difference between destroying bad bacteria or supporting good bacteria? I think also when I used to work for a long time as a teacher, and as a teacher you have two possibilities. You have a very difficult child you have to deal with, and either you can fix on the bad sides that he has. He cannot read well, his behavior is bad, and have to focus on the bad things, or you can say, oh, he's excellent in football, he has a wonderful voice, and let's try to support him in music. You understand?
Yes.
You can have to focus on the bad features, or you can have to focus on the good features. And I try also always, also when I'm dealing with anyone, I try to to be fixed on the good features and not on the bad features. That makes life more easy.
Enjoyable. How early can you tell if you have a good chick in the nest?
Well, well, I said once that even when I put on the rings, I know whether it's a superbird or not. That's and the rumor is going now. LÜTOLF can see when he puts a ring on whether it's a show winner or not. That's nonsense. But when the size of the feet, my younger daughter that was here before, saying hello and goodbye. She had to go back to school. At the moment, she's 11.5 years old, and she's growing enormously. I mean, I'm tall as well. I'm 1 meter 93, but I have quite small legs. Not legs. My shoes are quite small comparing to the size I have. But what I want to say is that the little daughter, she's getting very big feet at the moment. They grow, and she always has to buy new shoes. And it's the same with budgies. When you have a budgie and you have to put the ring on, I have every year a few birds that I was not able to put the ring on anymore because I miss them. But if it's a good bird, I keep him, and it doesn't matter if it's a bad one. It doesn't matter either. But what I say is that when you put the ring on a bird, you can see whether it has a big bone structure and whether it becomes a big bird. And that's what I wanted to say. And if a bird has very little dry feed, you have to take it away from the parents. Something is not going well. Maybe that bird you have to treat with some antibiotics. I use black paste that has tetracycline inside. And if a bird, I can see something is wrong with a baby, I try to give from that black paste and then try to put the bird into another box. Yeah, that's because when the feed is very small, then something is not going well with the development of the bird.
Okay.
That video was taken 3.5 years ago, I think, and some of the birds, that one as well, are still in the breeding. Not all of them. Some are dead, some are that one is sold, but some of them are still. It's also funny for me to see them. Or of course, I already have sons or grandsons of them, and I can realize or I can recognize certain features that they had. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, you're fine. The last question I had on the chat thus far, Chris Slaughter had asked, how old are your birds when you first pair them up?
Normally 8, 9, 10, 11 months, but there are always exceptions. Last year or 2 years ago, I'm not sure, I had a cinnamon gray green baby hen, and she started to lay eggs in the flight of the baby flight, and I took the eggs out and put it to any pairs, and they were fertile. So she was mating with sky blue, and that was also a baby croc. So these were really babies, maybe 10, 11, 12 weeks old. And I know that in nature, budgies can breed very, very early. They can start breeding with 10, 11, 12 weeks before the big molt starts. But these are the exceptions. I think sometimes you have hens that wants to breed with 5, 6, 7 months, then let them breed. But average age, I would say, is 8, 9 months for hens. And for cocks, also there are exceptions. I have cocks that are mating with 5, 6 months and they are fertile. But most of my cocks are used 10, 11, 12 months old. Some cocks, you have to wait 1.5 or 2 years until they get fertile. but that's also again exceptions.
Okay. Excellent. I think that's all the questions that have come through on the chat. Is there anything else you wanted to share with the group before we sign off and say thank you for sharing your time with us?
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm not sure how it works afterwards. We can try. We can. It's now 1.5 hours. We can try in the bird room how it looks like. The signal outside will be good. I can show you the bird room from the outside. Inside, it's you will see soon that the signal is getting weaker. But we can try and yeah.
Oh, what shall I say? We can have a quick look outside. Maybe you can use the video somehow. Hello. To show people where we live. That's our house, that's our car, that's the bird room. With the new roof, we made solar panels. Maybe now it's very windy, hot and windy. We can quickly go in. We are making a new nicer garden. My shoes. Yeah, that's how it looks like. These are the baby flights. These birds are born about 3-4 months ago, and yeah, they are slowly growing. I can do it like this. Okay. In a few months he will look like a real budgie. Yeah, just to explain quickly, where it's like this, there are a few bigger babies in. 4 here, for example. I leave that the air can come in. I make like this, so everywhere where it's like this, there are babies in. And that it stays cool, not cool, that it stays not too sticky in the bird room, in the nest box. And when you have this here, that means there are small babies, and yeah, they look okay. Just to check and to explain what I meant before. If I want to see something, I don't touch them. But instead of touching, I use like this to see are they well fed. Is everything okay? Good. That's a melanistic spangle, a nice hen. I'm not sure whether you have this mutation in Australia already as well. I like them a lot. It's a golden face melanistic spangle. Well, that's the bird room. That's the kitchen to prepare and clean everything. Here you see everywhere. That means small babies with this, big babies, small babies. That's how it's also easy for me if I make the check-in in the morning and the evening to know where I have to look whether birds are okay. So you save time when you have a certain system. When you want to open every cage, you lose too much time. And if you just can, that one just arrived. So that means I go and get a knife, and yeah, tonight I know exactly, okay, I need there to check because it's a knife. I wanted to show you a few birds, but yeah, we have to do that somehow. And next time they're all in the breeding boxes, and yeah, we have the European show in 2 weeks' time, and some of those birds will be used for showing, I hope. We will see. Well, it's the light has turned off, so yeah, the bird many birds. Oops! I told you it's windy. The birds went into the nest box. It's not easy to see them right now. They are in the sleeping mode. It's yeah, there's a nice one outside. Yeah, I think that's enough. I can go quickly downstairs as well. If you want to add that. I will see now it's dark because, yeah, as I told you, it's sleeping time. I have to put on the lights. This here is for heating in winter time, and now it's cooling the ground here. It's I cool it down on 18 degrees. Well, it's still what is it now, 24 degrees, but the ground is on 18 degrees, and yeah, the birds are sleeping. I have to wake them up, but very soon they will be very noisy. Yeah.
Thanks, Troy, and thank you, Daniel. That was fantastic. I'm sure we all learned something very valuable tonight. So, Troy, thanks for tonight. Great job. Just so everyone's aware, there was a lot of preparation that went into tonight. Troy's probably spent quite a few hours prepping for tonight, trying to get the right questions and doing a lot of research on some of the stuff that Daniel's presented in the last couple of years, so that he had the right angles to ask the right questions. So on behalf of everyone, Troy, thank you for the time you put in, because I don't think we realise how many hours you put in beforehand to getting this up and running for us. So thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
And that's really it. So obviously when we're able to secure our next meeting, we'll let everybody know. But yep, thank you all for joining in. Please spread the word, and obviously this will pop up on the YouTube channel the next day or two, so those that couldn't make it tonight have the opportunity to watch it. But the good thing about the live stuff is that you get to ask questions and you get to be a little bit interactive. So appreciate it all, and thank you very much, everyone.
Budgie Planet.
I got the cash in the bag, stadium packed. Born a rock star in this life, gon' live it up on the attack. Baby, I'm bad, I just wanna get caught up in this life. I'm crazy, I'm mad, doing no cap. Only God wants you, better go live it up. Cash in the bag, stadium packed. Baby, I'm bad,
yeah.
Baby, I'm bad.
I just wanna stay bad, stay mad. Chip on my shoulder cause they treat me like an outcast. I ain't gonna take that, stay back. I'll be swinging hard till the hits come in all caps. I ain't gonna lay back, pray that someone's gonna help me. Ain't nobody like that. I ain't gonna wait, that's all fact. Give me one shot and I'll never get the throne back. I'm sick of being cautious, I'ma go cause something, can't stop this. I'ma steal everybody's lane, call it shoplift. Sick of hearing everyone complain when they thoughtless. Taste the pain, it's like candy canes. It makes me go change into a better frame, into a better name. Society's insane, we all live for fame, yeah. Cash in the bag, stadium packed. Born a rock star in this life, gon' live it up on the attack. Baby, I'm bad, I just wanna get caught up in this life. I'm crazy, I'm mad, do it no cap. Only God wants you, better go live it up. Cash in the bag, stadium packed. Baby, I'm bad.